Okay, I've got it at 9:30, so we will commence.
I haven't got a number for him, Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. I think that Officer Nellis is going to email him. So we'll get on with the meeting. Thank you very much, Tony. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Broadland District Council Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 16th of September 2020, our virtual meeting. Thank you to all our officers who enable these virtual planning meetings to progress. Hopefully everything will run smoothly, but please be patient if we should find a few gremlins in the works. We will endeavour to resolve any problems as quickly as possible. Our meeting today will be recorded and the meeting will be live streamed for public viewing on YouTube. The recording of this meeting will also be available on Broadland District Council website, and you should be aware any comments made in this meeting will be recorded indefinitely. Please can I ask everyone in attendance to ensure that when your microphones are unmuted, that you should try to keep the background noise to a minimum. Background noise can be very distracting from the discussion and information being relayed through the meeting. My name is Councillor Sue Lawn. I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee. I will now ask our committee officer to proceed to a roll call for the other members of our Planning Committee. Thank you, Officer Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Adams.
Yeah, here. And yeah, no declarations of interest.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beadle.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Brennan.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Present and no declarations of interest. Thank you.
Councillor Karimi Guvanlu.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Lawn.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Leggett.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Prutton.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Riley.
Present and no declaration of interest.
And Councillor Ward.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Completes the roll call, Chairman.
Thank you, Officer Matthews. Also present with me today are Officers Helen Mellors, Assistant Director of Planning for Broadland and South Norfolk District Councils, Nigel Harris, East Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk District Councils, and one of our presenting officers today, Matthew Rook, Central Area Team Manager for Broadland and South Norfolk, and our second presenting officer today, Lee Arthurton from Democratic Services, who will be our host for today, and Don Matthews from Democratic Services will take and prepare the minutes of our meeting. Thank you. All members of the committee have received in advance paper copies of the agenda, presentation slides, and public written submission for the applications we will be considering today. At various points throughout the meeting, for example, in relation to questions and comments, I will do a roll call member to member in alphabetical order, requesting the committee members' input. Today, I'm pleased to confirm we will have public speaking for this planning meeting. Only members of the public who have registered to speak in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking will be able to address the committee. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker per parish council. Please be aware there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents or photographs at this meeting. The order of our meeting today will be as follows. The planning officer will present the key points for the applications to the committee for their consideration. This will be followed by questions to the presenting officer from members of the committee in relation to the presentation. Public speakers will then be invited to address the committee. This again will be followed by questions to the public speaker from members of the committee. I must emphasize that these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not for the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Parish Town Council first, followed by objectors, and finally supporters, i.e. the applicant or the agent. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes for each speaker. The committee will then discuss and determine the application with the proposer and seconder for each of the applications we will consider today. Members will give their vote to the proposal by roll call, and our committee officers will relay the result of the votes to the meeting. Do we have any questions before we proceed? No, thank you. Okay, and we will now move to our agenda. And we've already done agenda item number 1. So if we can move to agenda item number 2. Officer Matthews, do you have any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillors Grattan and Moncur, and their substitutes are Councillors Leggett and Brennan.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will now move on to agenda item number 3. It's stated as number 4 in our paperwork, but it's agenda item number 3, and it's the schedule of applications. The first application today is application 2020-1193, plot 7, Broadland Gate Business Park. Officer Arthurton, can I confirm that we have all the public speakers for this application in attendance before we begin the presentation?
Yes, I can confirm.
Thank you. And just for public information, I will explain the process of this section of the meeting, how it will follow. This presentation will be presented by Officer Harris. Our officer will be sharing his screen throughout the presentation. Members will also have this presentation information via hard copies. Committee members, please ensure you do not leave your screen at any time during the presentation, the public speaking, or discussion of this application. If you should need to leave for any reason, please give the reason for leaving to the host through the chat, and you will need to understand that you could then be in a situation where you are unable to vote on the application under discussion at the time of your absence. Please be advised if a member should lose connection for a period of time, the meeting will be adjourned until the member reconnects. Please note a member will be given a period of 5 minutes to reconnect before the meeting will resume. If the member has not reconnected in the timescale allowed, he or she will not have a vote on the application under consideration at the time of losing connection. Members, can I advise you that on conclusion of this presentation, I will ask through roll call if you have any questions in relation to this presentation. Could I please request, if you should have any further questions or comments after I've asked you in a roll call, would you please address these questions through the chat, and your host Leah will bring it to my attention. We will now proceed to the presentation. Thank you, Officer Harris.
Chairman, I'll just get the screen up. Can you see that first slide, plot 7?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is a full application for full or detailed planning permission for the erection of an electric vehicle charging station together with ancillary uses. Okay, just to put the site in context, we're on the eastern edge of Poswick and suburbs of Thorpe St Andrew. Members will be familiar with Broadland Business Park and the Broadland Gate Business Park at the Poswick interchange. So we're on the eastern edge here, A47, and then the start of the Broadland Northway, the A1270 that runs along the eastern and forms the eastern boundary of the application site. Next slide. That's the plot itself. Members will recall, most of you, that we dealt with an application at Planning Committee last week for a police station, and that was roughly in this location here for a new police station, and that was approved. So we've got another site again on Broadland Gate Industrial Area and Business Park, and we're to the east of that. Put the site in context in terms of the development plan. It's an employment allocation. It's allocated in the Growth Triangle Area Action Plan. It's also identified in the Joint Course Strategy as a strategic employment site. It has planning permission for various uses, and you'll be aware that now full applications have been determined and developments on some of the plots are actually commencing. Put it in context as well, you've also dealt recently with several planning applications for mixed uses on the allocated land GT11 to the north for mixed uses comprising residential, primary school, etc. And again, it's a strategic location in terms of its proximity to the A47. To put the plots, that's this plot here, plot 7, adjacent to that eastern boundary of the Broadland Northway. So you've got the off slip from the A47 that brings you up to the roundabout and the arm that goes round and then joins the Broadland Northway. Once you get to that roundabout, it gives you the ability to either come up and round and into the site from this direction, or to come up to this roundabout and to go back down to the interchange and then up over the existing overbridge to this roundabout junction and to come into the site from this point here to the on the western side. Block plan, so put the site in context, that's the Broadland Northway. This is the main building, sort of sat parallel to the Broadland Northway. Access coming into it, the site entrance from existing internal access road, proposed substation on this side, and then a circulation that runs around clockwise into and out of the site. There is parking around the outside where vehicles can wait if they're pre-booked or waiting their turn to charge, etc. There's also an outdoor picnic area, because obviously these electric vehicle charging points are becoming key pieces of infrastructure in terms of people planning routes because of the nature of an electric vehicle. You've got a protected tree here, and the layout takes into account the relationship with that. Let's carry on with the slides. These are the charging points. There's a mixture of different charging points from HGV down to smaller vehicle as listed in your report. Elevations, these are quite small scale, so we'll move on to larger drawings. I think the maximum is just over 12 meters high. This is the element of the building which will be seen at the southern end, and then predominantly it's then 8 meters high. Corporate colours as proposed to give it an identity, quite contemporary in terms of nature of materials and design. I think quite striking for that frontage plot. Some CGIs of the computer generated images of the building. This is looking at it from the side entrance from the internal access road within the business park. That's the western elevation. Sort of bird's eye perspective, Broadland Northway on your left-hand side. Again, another bird's eye perspective, just to give you the general impression of the building. That was that protected tree I referred to earlier. Then site location from the part of the Posig interchange infrastructure. This is the new overbridge that carries traffic to and from the starter end at the southern end of the Broadland Northway. So that site in the distance here, that protected tree which you saw, and obviously remembering that the whole of this area here has permission for business park, so is going to see development and new buildings. Oh, let's jump back, excuse me. The next slide, that's the area of the new building works itself. Obviously you're seeing photographs of the site pre-development here. Again, a view further north along Broadland Northway, and all of this land on the right-hand side here is allocated and has planning permission and will be developed out in time. Again, another view, and this is, I think, from the footpath cycleway that runs on the eastern edge of the Broadland Northway, the bridleway as labelled. And leave it on that slide. If I can take members briefly to the presentation. The item is before members for consideration if the proposal is a use which does not fall within the particular use classes which the site was both allocated for and has planning permission for. And the main reason for that is due to the passage of time, and obviously with these technologies moving on, it's an older planning permission now and an older allocation, but obviously we are responding to changes as they're coming forward in terms of climate change and government policies. And that said, the proposal is to be welcomed as it seeks to respond to the UK government pledge to stop the sale of petrol and diesel and now hybrid cars also by potentially 2035 at the latest. the applicant company aiming to provide a network of such charging facilities to meet growing demand. The plot, as you saw, was to the east of the new police station, which members resolved to approve at Planning Committee last week. You saw as well from the slides, the building is contemporary in design and nature and has a position on the outer edge of the Broadland Business Park, the Broadland Gate Business Park with a public frontage to the Broadland Northway. In summary, the proposal is considered entirely acceptable within this location and is also an important addition to roadside services, both locally and at this point along the route of the A47 trunk road in terms of providing strategic roadside services, particularly for EVs. So the recommendation is one of approval as set out before you on page 19 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Officer Harris. If we can go back to the screen. Okay, and if I could just ask if members have any questions in relation to the presentation for the officer, please. Councillor Ward and Councillor Brennan. If we go with Councillor Brennan first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, good morning, Nigel. I noticed that part of the proposal is for retail, if I'm correct on that. Is that correct? Small cafe, coffee shop, retail. It says in paragraph 1.2.
That's correct. The first floor provides some ancillary retail space. Obviously, with charging of EV vehicles, it can take from minutes to hours in terms of charging, and so it provides some facilities where people can rest, take a break from driving.
Oh yeah, I concur fully with that. I don't have a problem from that point of view. I'm just wondering, bearing in mind what we considered last week, is this retail part going to be taken out of the remaining amount of retail allocation for Broadland Gate?
Straight answer, no, because this is seen as ancillary to the the primary use of. It's like a petrol filling station that has a small area of retail with it.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Councillor Ward.
Yes, thank you. Nice. I just wanted to ask, as there is a cafe here, there will be people probably turning up in their petrol cars. Are there some parking spaces that are not with the electric charging points, please?
There will be, yes. I mean, I don't think there's anything to stop a petrol vehicle entering the site. It may be something that I think you've got the applicant speaking today, so they may want to touch on how the site is going to be managed in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. We will move on to public speaking now. And if I can just bring it to your attention that we don't have any representation from the Parish Council, nor do we have any members of the public objecting to this application. So we'll move to the first public speaker, and it's Mr. Raoul Tufnell. And Officer Arthurton, could you please unmute Mr. Tufnell? Okay. Or Mr. Tufnell, can you unmute yourself? Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tufnell, for attending our meeting today. I would like to confirm that you are aware that you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. Unfortunately, we don't have a clock that we can share on the screen, as that was likely from our members. However, Officer Arthurton will advise you when you will have 1 minute remaining. Is that acceptable to you?
That's acceptable. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. If you could please introduce yourself, and you'll have 5 minutes starting from now.
No problem. Well, good morning, everyone. Chairperson and members of the Planning Committee. I lead GridServe's Planning and Development Department, and we are seeking your approval for Norwich East Electric Forecourt, as we're referring. Our mission is to deliver a dependable, people-led network of over 100 electric forecourts UK-wide. These utilise renewable energy, either generated on-site or from another operational solar farm, to power the existing and growing electric vehicle network. We believe this to be highly complementary to the objectives of the wider Broadland Gate Business Park, and has the potential not only to charge vehicles of its occupants, but also to support other forms of e-mobility. Should we be successful here today, we intend for the site to be operational next year. The consistent characteristics of our development portfolio, and which Norwich East encapsulates includes the adjacency of major roads, the integration with other significant planned developments that will be vehicle trip generators, and the proximity of significant residential and business populations. The ancillary functions of the forecourt have been designed to make the most of one's charging time, and in an increasingly fast-paced and mobile working environment, the grid-served lounge, as we refer, elevated above the chargers, will provide a relaxing, sociable place to dwell. The building itself will be designed to minimise its life cycle carbon emissions and will have multiple uses designed to be accessible for all. Externally, the site, whilst needing to be highly visible from the roadside and the connecting business park, is proposed to have softened landscape edges to the south and east, as well as further planting to the north. The planting scheme includes 6 hornbeams, semi-evergreens to green the arrival to the site and the entrance, and an additional 13 larger trees to include both oak and birch surrounding a proposed outdoor amenity area. And the site is wrapped in an almost continuous mixed leaf hedgerow designed to maximise biodiversity and promote green corridors within and beyond the site. And the electric forecourt is intended to connect to the walking and cycling infrastructure proposed for the wider business park, and provide cycle infrastructure locally to park for those wishing to use the amenities. The forecourt has been future-proofed, with every parking space having the potential to have charging installed. And I referenced to the discussion previously, there are 12 customer car parking spaces, 6 of which at year 1 will have the ability to charge from, but certainly provision for non-electric vehicle drivers to access. And there is the ability in future to incorporate a future vehicle queuing system to ensure that there's adequate safe circulation site internally as demand increases. And the external space is designed to safely maintain the flow of vehicles, but that's also of varying sizes. So that includes, as the case officer referenced, provision for HGVs to circulate the site and charge safely separately. The Norwich East Electric Forecourt would be at the forefront of a much wider rollout of EV charging infrastructure and makes, we believe, a significant statement regarding the Council's commitment to delivering a net zero economy, including the creation on site at operational point of 5 full-time equivalent green jobs at the forecourt. It will uphold government's objectives within the Road to Zero, most importantly, and adding further momentum behind the need for more sustainable, electrified travel. I therefore respectfully ask members of the Planning Committee to endorse the officer's recommendation and support our proposals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Tufnell today? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated. We will now go into discussion as a committee to determine the application. So if we can move on to that, thank you. So members, we will now have open discussion in relation to the application in front of us. You will remain unmuted as a committee. Please can I ask if you would like to comment or ask a question of the officers? Please register a request to do so in the chat and I'll come to you in turn. After this discussion, the committee will then determine the division of the application on the proposal and seconding of this application. If necessary during the discussion, Officer Mellor and Officer Harris will be able to respond to your questions accordingly. Okay, and I believe
Sue, can I just mention that Councillor Folger has joined us, but obviously as he hasn't been at the beginning of this item, he won't be able to be part of the discussion, but he can obviously join discussion and voting on the next items.
So you won't be able to vote on this one. That's absolutely fine.
No.
Chair.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Councillor Fulcher.
Chair, the chat box won't work on this iPad that I've got, so I'm just indicating I wish to speak. Okay,
thank you. And if I can just confirm that through chat we have had it proposed by Councillor Fisher that we should go with the officer's recommendation for this application.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Okay, but we will still have a discussion before we go to the vote. So if we can go to Councillor Riley, please.
Yes, could I just make a point here, Chair, as well, about proposing that something is moved via the chat box? The chat box, as I understand it, is not public. And I would expect really for a proposer to be, for that to be done verbally.
Councillor Riley, I will come back to Councillor Fisher for his comment, but you said that you wanted to speak first, so I'm giving you the option to speak. It is a public viewing if it's out there, but I totally appreciate what you're saying, and we can discuss that further another time. But at the moment, that's the situation. Thank you.
Yes, because when it's put in a chat box and set up front, then clearly something's been done before a debate, and I don't
Everybody's
think it's
entitled to do that, Councillor Riley.
not in the chat box. I'm
get,
suggesting.
Yeah, but you know, but anybody can propose it. Okay, absolutely fine. If you just get to your
the requirements moving forward in terms of our environment and the government's positioning around this, as the officers already explained, is really imperative. It meets all the design criteria. If you look at the policies involved in this nationally and also locally, and we've only got to look at the news. I mean, we all saw last night the UN's positioning around the state of the planet and what needs to be done, and it is quite urgent. So we've still got a long way to go. Whilst electricity is still being produced via some fossil fuels, at the end of the day, this is still a help in regards to the overall environmental requirements in the future. I think it would be completely remiss of us not to support this application, and therefore I would also verbally and publicly move this as well, Chair, and I hope that we could proceed with this expeditiously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my apologies for proposing something in the chat box. It was purely meant to indicate that I would like to speak, but I endorse exactly everything that Councillor Riley said. So to me, I think it's a good location. This is the type of facility we need. The fact that it's going to be coming on board within 12 months, I think is excellent. Yeah, 100% or 110% behind it. This is really what we need. I'm pleased that we've got this location on the east of Norwich coming online, or proposed to come online so quickly, because there will be a need. People I talk to that are looking at buying electric vehicles, their main concern is the facility of charging points across the country. So, and, yeah, if I'm happy to second that. And I think my only issue to the client is they talk about HGV charging. I'm not convinced HGVs will be electric, but I'm certain those HGV charging points could soon be made for the domestic vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
No, nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just fully behind the recommendation, basically.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Members, do you have any further discussion that you'd like to make in relation to this application at the moment, or should we go to the vote?
Go to the vote.
Thank you very much. And if I can just announce, Leah, we don't have any further comments that I haven't noticed or nobody's been brought to your attention.
No further comments.
Thank you very much. Members, it's been proposed by Councillor Fisher and seconded by Councillor Adams that we should, as a committee, agree to the officer's recommendation to approve this application, subject to the conditions stated on page 19 of your papers. And Officer Matthews, if I could ask you please to proceed to the roll call for the vote in alphabetical order.
Thank you, Chairman. If members could indicate if they are for or against the proposal. Councillor Adams?
For.
Councillor Beadle?
For.
Councillor Brennan?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlou?
For.
Councillor Lawn?
For.
Councillor Leggett?
For.
Councillor Prutton?
For.
Councillor Riley?
For.
Councillor Ward?
For.
That's unanimously carried, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Officer Matthews. That's very much appreciated. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Tufnell, and we will now move on to the second application. And if I could just please, Officer Arthurton, can I just confirm that we have our public speakers in place for this application?
Yes, Yes, I can
with Mark
confirm.
Thompson and Thea Charmley.
Yes.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, application number 2020-0861, Adam and Eve House, Little Hobus, Colchester. And Officer Harris is going to do this presentation. So, Officer Harris, it's all over to you. Thank you.
Thanks again, Chairman. Hopefully you are now sharing my screen and seeing the title page. Good.
Thank you very much.
So this is a full application for detailed planning permission for the erection of a dwelling. I do want to point out a typographical error which is referred to on page 60 of the agenda, the supplementary schedule. In the final sentence of paragraph 6.2 on page 37, we've referred to the word acceptable, and that should say unacceptable. So apologies for that, but just need to point that out if it hadn't already been spotted. Also to indicate that the application is before members for consideration at the request of the ward member, the local ward member, for the reasons set out in paragraph 4.2 on page 25 of your agenda. Okay, so just to put the site in context, that is the application site. We are in open countryside. The nearest settlements and parishes with settlement limits are Coltishall and Horsted in this general area here, and also Buxton with Lammas in this area here. And it's approximately 1.6 miles to Buxton and about 2 miles to the edge of Coltishall. We are very much dealing with a site in a countryside location outside of any settlement limits. Just slow to open, but that, excuse me. That's the aerial view of the site. Again, just in terms of context, so people can get perspective between the proximity of Coltishall and Buxton. What you have got here is the outer edge of the former RAF Coltishall, now Scotto Enterprise Park. You've got local highway network that serves the site at Little Hobbiss, and to also point out you've got the route of the Bure Valley Railway that runs close to the site. Indeed, there's a road bridge that takes the Hobbiss Road over the Bure Valley Railway, and you've also got the Bure Valley footpath and cycleway as part of that network. Next slide. You note from the report that there are listed buildings in proximity to the site. The applicant's property is a Grade 2 listed building, Adam and Eve House. That's located here to the southwest of the application site, and also a dwelling known as Foxwood, and some of its barn and outbuildings, which are also Grade 2 listed, and that's the general location of those. There's also another residential property in here known as Woodside. You'll see that, that's Woodside. This is the application site. It will gain access, propose to gain access to Great Hobbiss Road from a track that also serves Foxwood and goes up to some agricultural land. This is the road that comes over the railway bridge that I described and then heads off in this direction. And then you've got the Bure Valley Railway and footpath and cycleway that goes with that in a cutting at that point. Block plan. This is that's the extent of the application site. Proposing to take access from that lockway that then adjoins Great Hobbiss Road. The land level slopes upwards gently, and it is proposed to create a level area to site the dwelling and the servicing area in terms of vehicle parking and turning, etc. Solid extract, that's the block plan. Orientation of the property within the plot, because of the proposed passive house premium standard, is on a north, south, east, west orientation, which then presents it at an angle to the lockway, so effectively the west elevation. That's the Loke and Great Hobbiss Road on this left-hand side. Black and white elevations, very much designed to the passive house design. Narrow gable, effectively 2.5 stories in height. Ground floor plan, first floor plan, and some rooms in the roof space. A section through, ground floor, first floor, and that loft space with openings in the top that allows for natural ventilation and heat to move through the building to rise and then vent through the top. We've then got graphic images of the elevations of the dwelling. This is the north elevation. That's effectively the entrance. The east elevation. The south elevation, combination of photovoltaic and solar panels and hot water panels on the back of the property, a veranda or first floor balcony that's enclosed. And south elevation, that's very west elevation. An angled view of combination of the west and the north elevation from within the site. Now moving to photographs outside of the site. So that's the property, that's Woodside on the left-hand side, and that's the Adam and Eve, the applicant's dwelling here. So the road has come over the railway and it then bears round to the left. The site itself is in this general location behind this established planting to the frontage. Next slide, we're now north. The site is on the left-hand side. This is where the road came over the railway bridge and where they stood to take that photograph beforehand. That's Woodside, and just see the location of the Adam and Eve arrowed there. Next slide, so the site itself, let's say, is in this location here, which is then north of the Adam and Eve, which you see arrowed there. This is the type bend where the loke, which serves foxwood and agricultural land, and it's off the loke that access would be formed to the application site. There you see we're further along the west of Great Hobbiss Road. That's that loke where it adjoins Great Hobbiss Road. The point of access to be formed approximately in that location, and then the site behind it. Standing along the site frontage, looking again at that loke, that's the entrance to Foxwood. You've got mature planting, landscaping, primarily deciduous between that and then the dwelling itself, again a listed building. Next slide, we're now into the site itself. The approximate position of the dwelling is where the photograph is being taken from. That's the Adam and Eve, the greater listed building, so we're looking south. That is the Adam and Eve public, former public house actually, but the property, just to give you an idea of what the listed building looks like. That's the, again within the site, again from the approximate position of the dwelling looking west, picking up the site frontage. Majority of that vegetation, let's say, is to be retained, and they're just creating an access through onto that lokeway. Apologies for that, we seem to be jumping. That's the next slide. Again, within the site, looking northwards towards and out of the site as to where Foxwood is, but currently because of vegetation, you don't see that. And then the view to the east, the land level slopes to the north and also to the east as well, and that's the boundary treatment on the east within agricultural land. Beyond that, being within the countryside. I'll leave members on that slide. So, taking you to the report, in terms of the development plan, which is the primary consideration here, the site is outside of the settlement limit for Buxton, is therefore identified as part of the countryside in the Joint Course Strategy. Policy GC2 of the Development Management DPD indicates that development will be accommodated within settlement limits, and that outside of these limits, development which does not result in any significant adverse impacts will be permitted where it accords with a specific allocation or policy of the development plan. The site is not allocated in the Site Allocations Dpd, neither does the proposal accord with any of the rural enterprise exceptions in policy H1 of your DMDPD, which relates to dwellings that can be erected outside of settlement limits where they relate to businesses, enterprises, etc., that demonstrate there is a requirement, a functional and financial need to live on site. Planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The material consideration in this particular case is that the applicant considers the proposal to be an example that meets the guidance set out in paragraph 79 of the MPPF, a material consideration that can be given some weight contrary to the development plan where the design is of exceptional quality. For members' benefit, and you've probably already read this, that the exceptional quality criterion of paragraph 79 are quoted in full in paragraph 5.8 on page 32 of the agenda. It is important to state in relation to the test set by paragraph 79E that all four aspects need to be met, and these set a very high bar that proposals have to reach. This test has been made clear by planning inspectors' decisions when considering appeals against the previous design of exceptional quality test, which was the old paragraph 55 in the previous MPPF. Whilst the proposal before you today can be described as innovative, promoting the passive house premium standard, as is described in paragraph 111 of your report, this alone does not meet one of the four criterion set by paragraph 79E, let alone all four, as is required by the test in relation to the test of exceptional quality under this paragraph. The case officer's assessment on pages 31 to 37 deals with the key considerations, including policy compliance or otherwise, setting of the list of buildings and the MPPF as a material consideration. An important consideration in assessing the merits of this application are the comments of the Council's Heritage and Design Officer, and it is to be noted that amongst other concerns, he does not consider that this proposal is of exceptional quality and that it doesn't meet the stringent and high bar tests that paragraph 79 of the MPPF requires. In conclusion, as set out in section 6 on page 37 of the report, the proposal is considered contrary to stated development plan policies, not meeting the requirements of paragraph 79 of the MPPF, and the recommendation is for refusal as before you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Officer Matt Harris. And members, if we can go back to the members, please. Okay, members, do you have any questions in relation to the presentation for the officer, please? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have any representation from the Parish Council in relation to this application, but we do have two members of the public who'd like to speak. And if I could just please ask Officer Arthurton to unmute Theo Palmley, the applicant, and Mark Thompson, agent, as they are in attendance. I believe that you will both be sharing the 5 minutes that you have in relation to public speaking. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And can I just confirm with you that you have 5 minutes to address the committee? As I've said previously, we don't have a clock that we can show you the time. That would hide you from our members. So Officer Arthurton will remind you when you have 1 minute. Okay, so if I could ask, which one of you would like to go first? Okay, thank you. If you could introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes between you and them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm the agent for this application. I do work with a lot of parish councils in Norfolk, helping them to develop their neighbourhood plans. And a fairly common theme is that if they're going to have new housing, that's likely to be eco-housing, that's also broadly in keeping with the rural setting. And this has been the guiding brief on this application. There are no particular planning concerns apart from whether it meets the tests of paragraph 79B in the MPPF. A detailed analysis was set out in the committee report, but I think it got a few aspects wrong, and so unintentionally misapplied the policy. And I'll look at each of these tests in turn. Test 1 is that it needs to be innovative or outstanding. In the report, such as the paragraph 5.10, it says that the design is not outstanding, and so it fails this test. Now, it needs to be either innovative or outstanding, but not both. The committee report accepts it's innovative, being the very first dwelling to meet passive house premium standards in the country. Many designs such of this type are grand design type schemes and considered to be outstanding. This isn't outstanding in this grand design sense. And indeed, this is part of the point, which I'll explain shortly. Test 2 would help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. Many such applications of the grand design type, as I've said, fantastic and large and unusual buildings, and that's fine as far as it goes. But just how do these help to raise design standards across rural areas? Can they really be rolled out across rural Norfolk, given the costs and bespoke nature? The point of this application is that while the design is highly innovative, the end project is something we might see in rural Norfolk. We think it's achieved this, being a fairly traditional rural-looking building, as you could see, of a normal livable scale. Designs such as this could easily be seen elsewhere in rural Norfolk, which I'll show you shortly. So it can be rolled out across rural Norfolk and help to raise design standards. Test 3 is be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. I believe the committee report was mistaken on this point. For example, it says the design does not successfully replicate traditional design. But this isn't the test. The test is to be sensitive to defining local characteristics. And the report doesn't really pick these out. They include the main body of the house being a symmetrical gable with a shallow pitched lean-to at the rear. And I have a lovely book in front of me here called Building Norfolk, which has an example of just that sort of design. A tall gable proportion, of which there are many local examples, brick gables, whitewash masonry and timber windows, again, very common locally. So I think it does meet that test. And finally, test 4 will significantly enhance its immediate setting. Again, the report is not quite right on this test. For 5.10, it sets out that it is not sensitive to the wider setting, which is a requirement of paragraph 79E. This is not one of the tests, it's at the immediate setting, not the wider one. It also says, nor will the design blend in seamlessly into the surrounding landscape. It has to enhance the setting, not blend in. It's meant to enhance it and not be invisible. The immediate setting is an unassuming garden plot, as you could see, mown to grass with a chicken coop. Not unpleasant, but nothing special about it. I think the introduction of a lovely house on such an unassuming plot that is of a scale and design to be in keeping, whilst having some interesting contemporary features, will enhance significantly the immediate setting. And in conclusion, I think this is a really exciting opportunity in Broadland, the first of its kind in the country that can be rolled out across the rural areas. And I would urge the committee to support it.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mrs. Tomley.
Chairman, councillors, I'm the owner of this plot and propose this self-build for my own dwelling in the future. Despite its modest appearance, it will be of national importance as the first house in the UK to be built to the very highest passive house premium level. Generating renewable energy far in excess of its own requirements, it will contribute to Norfolk's emission reduction target. The rebed drainage system and landscaping will increase the quality and diversity of the habitats for wildlife, while benefiting the neighbourhood through also reducing the danger of flooding in the extreme rain events that we experience more frequently nowadays. The project will also use local firms, providing employment and training opportunities for local workers. My neighbours and the local community are extremely supportive of this project, which demonstrates our priorities to combat global warming and climate change, while also protecting and enhancing our local environment and wildlife. Many people have expressed interest in buying my...
Chairman, 1 minute's up.
Okay, would you mind just summing up, please?
It has sustainable access to local facilities along the Bure Valley footpath, which allows 30 minutes maximum stroll to get to shops, pubs and schools.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Members of the committee, can I ask, do you have any questions for our public speakers today? No? Okay, thank you very much for your time. We will now, as a committee, discuss this application, and after the discussion, we will determine the application on the decision on the proposal and seconding of the application. Members, we will have Officer Lincoln and, Officer Mellors and Officer Harris to be able to respond to your questions. Do I have anyone who wishes to make a comment in relation to this application, please?
Chair.
Councillor Riley?
Sorry, excuse me. Are we in debates now, Chair?
Yes, we are.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I lost signal then. Yes, Chair. In relation to this application, I actually think that it does meet the requirements of MPF 79 and then the corresponding requirements under the DPD, GC4, etc. And I'm going to register actually that I'm moving that this actually gets approved, and I'm now going to give my reasons why I'm making that move in terms of the motion, Chair. When we look at the design of the building, it is picking up on styling cues. I know this area really well. The local parish council, actual fact, have another vote on this last night, and there's many members of that parish council that live in this village all their life. One's 85 and completely supports this. The reason is that in its setting, this actually enhance the setting. It's a local setting. I believe that the consultant was right about this and the point he was making. It's not a general wider area. Also, when you look at the report as well, it states very clearly that there is no amenity issue or interference in that way with the two listed buildings that are there. So that complies as well. What this actually comes down to is judgment. It comes down to judgment, and the officer within the report states this as well, that it is subjective. Those words are used here. It is about judgment as to whether you believe that the appearance of this is actually commensurate with the setting that it's going into and the general style of things around the piece. Well, we have to have a look at the what's material in this in terms of making this decision. Yes, it is outside the settlement limit. However, we all know, and we have agreed to houses before outside the settlement limit, if they met this criteria. I do believe it does meet the criteria. One, the design is picking up on styling cues, the brick and also the render and the white of that, but it is also modern. I think it's innovative. If you look at the two verandas there, they're linked by this staircase. If you look at the passive premium innovation within this, this will be the first house in the UK. The first house in the UK. Now, what we're actually saying here is what we can't have in rural settings in the future, I believe, is just simply carbon copies of a typical Norfolk cottage. The design, the Norfolk design reference that the consultant made reference to as well, I'm well aware of that. And it actually is picking up those design cues from it. I've got the book in my library. So I believe under paragraph 79, this is about judgment. I think actually does meet it in terms of innovation. I think it does meet it in terms of quality of design. And I believe that it's simply down to judgment. It's a subjective one. It meets all the other criteria, as you can see, within the report. And I think we'd be hard pushed not to support this application, to be honest, with its innovation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Chair. I would like to second that, what Steve has said.
Thank you, Councillor Karimi.
I think this is quite an innovative design, and I think we would be very remiss not to go ahead with this, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Fisher who would like to speak, please. And Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Riley has summed up a lot of what I was going to say. I think when I read the report initially, and then looked at the accompanying paperwork with the design and the drawings, I expected to see a tick of those with a corrugated roof. This actually, I think, is a really decent design. It is a judgment on whether it meets the criteria of 79E. I personally think it does. And I think it is an exciting opportunity for Broadland to be leading the way on this particular design, on this particular aspect of passive house. And so I really do support and approve of this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett?
Thank you, Chairman. I found that reading the whole of paragraphs 5 and 6, the assessment and the conclusion, I was on balance a bit here, but I wonder if Officer Nigel Harris would help me, because Mr. Thompson, in his comments, he made very strong points about the requirements in 5.8. For instance, truly outstanding or innovative, criticize that and the others. Would Nigel please just help me as to the difference between his interpretations and Mr. Thompson's? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, to answer that, as I say, we've listed the extract from paragraph 79E in paragraph 5.8. The wording is there before you on page 32.
Yes.
So part of that first criteria is truly outstanding or innovative. We are accepting that it is innovative, but it then reads on, also reflecting the highest standards in architecture. And that's one of the 4 tests that this has to meet. We are accepting that it meets the innovative. We are not accepting, and I accept this is subjective, but you have before you detailed comments of your design officer, which are set out in paragraph 4.4, and he has tried to conclude and assess each of those tests as part of his summing up an assessment of the proposal. So accepting of the innovative aspect of the application, we do, but as officers and looking at the high bar that para 79 sets, and also in terms of the location of the development, we do not consider that it meets the high bar of section 79 of the NPPF, and therefore you default to,
excuse me,
in accordance with your development plan policies. We're outside of the settlement limit. It's an unsustainable location for new residential development, and it isn't something that we see that we can unfortunately support. Potentially as well, it could give a message that if a development adopts a passive house standard, that it gives a way of getting development in the countryside, which obviously doesn't follow the hierarchy and in terms of stability and location as to where new development should be located.
Chair, if I may, can I just come in there too?
Yes, of course. As Nigel, have you finished?
Yes.
We were losing you, unfortunately. Councillor Officer Mellors.
I think obviously these types of applications are always really difficult to sometimes consider, but I just want to re-emphasise that we haven't looked at this lightly. The bar of para 79 of the NPPF is extremely high. In our opinion, this is nowhere near that bar of being a really outstanding or innovative or meeting all 4 criteria. We've had appeal statements where they've been dismissed, where 2 of the criteria have been met, and that includes it being a innovative or outstanding design, but then not respecting its rural character, enhancing the landscape setting. You do have to look at it as all those 4 issues. You'll see from the design officer who has reviewed all our recent appeals on these, looked at appeal decisions nationally, it is only a handful in the country that get approved a year. It is actually not replicating it necessarily on a case-by-case basis, in my opinion. I think I do differ on what the agent was saying there. It is about, you know, those one-off innovative, and it doesn't have to be a large-scale building, but it does have to be more than what you have got before you now, in my opinion. The design officer, I think, has really carefully sort of summed it up at the last, and his last paragraph on page 29. You know, it does have to be something defining the characteristics of the area. And he doesn't feel in this case that the design successfully references local character or that it will result in a dwelling of exceptional design quality. He's made that really clear to you, that in his opinion, it does not meet that barrier, that high bar. What I would say is, you know, this is the sort of dwelling we want to see in our development limits. This is the quality of design we want to see on our allocated sites. It's not a one-off. It's the sort of thing that we should be expecting on a lot of our design quality in all our housing that we now permit going forward. Does it meet this bar as per Para 79? I don't think it does.
Okay, thank you. And we can come to Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is a very finely balanced one. I'm not particularly enamoured of the design, but I think it does fit in a way, especially the east elevation. I think that looks very, very Norfolk to me. I think the house itself is a bit stark and would benefit from a few more trees around it. But it is an outstanding house, and as we say, it's certainly the first house of that quality in the whole country. So on that basis, and looking at the balance overall, I would come down in favour of granting approval on this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher?
I really just want to add that I think it's good that this has come to committee. I take exactly what Helen said, and I believe it matches the criteria. It is a judgment and it is very finely balanced. But I do just want to say I think it's really good that it has come to committee so we can have the debate and bring it into the public view. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and Chair, if I could just add one last comment here as well. It is finely balanced, and it is subjective about it meeting the design criteria. Its setting and where it is. The report also states that it meets all the rest of it in terms of the Adam and Eve, in terms of its setting, etc. There's no amenity issue. You'll see that there's no objections to this whatsoever. That's because the local villagers have pictured this and know exactly what we're talking about. And the design criteria, I believe, and this is down to the committee's judgment, this is why the law has this for us to decide. And the judgment, I believe, is actually the benefits here outweigh any harm. This is clearly stated in 79. It's clearly stated through planning policy. Does the benefit outweigh any harm? In every application like this, you will always find some harm. It's whether the benefit outweighs that, and the benefit in this case does outweigh that, and that should be our planning committee decision based upon that.
Okay, thank you. Officer Mellor.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that? I think you haven't got to do your harms versus benefits here. You are looking at whether it meets all 4 criteria of Para 79. There is no harms versus benefits that you need to consider here. The officers have quite clearly said there isn't a harm to the listed building, and in amenity terms it's acceptable. So that is given, and I think members are agreeing with that. But then you don't weigh up those harms versus the benefits. You are looking at it, ensuring that it meets all 4 criteria of Para 79. And we need to make that really clear, because obviously once this decision is made, then obviously other decisions will refer back to this to some degree.
Well, could I also just say that is mentioned in the report? The officer actually mentions harm outweighing benefit. So we'll park it there, I think, okay?
I think that we're okay. I think that we are ready to go to the vote. So,
excuse me,
Chairman,
make a comment.
Yeah, you got
Chairman, I've had my hand up for quite some time now.
Okay, apologies, I didn't see that. And again, if I don't pick it up,
others have jumped in who've spoken previously, and I haven't.
I'm really sorry, Councillor Adams. I did not see your hand go up, and I've said previously, if you put your request through chat, then Leah can bring that to my attention as well. So, Councillor Adams, if you'd like to say.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think I'm going to be in the minority. I'm going to upset my very good friend, Councillor Riley, but I can't support the recommendation for approval. I listened very carefully to what Mark Thompson said, and he said that this building or this application, it's the same as other properties within Broadland. Councillor Riley said that it's a typical Norfolk cottage. Well, that's not what we're looking at when you look at NPPF 79. It talks about being an outstanding building, not just a sort of similar to other properties or typical of a Norfolk cottage. So I agree with the officers. I don't believe that it meets the NPPF paragraph 79. And Chairman, I know I'd be outvoted, but that's fine. But I cannot, I'm afraid, support you, Councillor Riley, in approving this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Adams, and apologies that I didn't pick you up sooner.
That's all right. You're forgiven.
Thank you. Councillor Karimi?
Can I just make a final comment that design is subjective, and what one person thinks is good design, maybe another person doesn't think is good design. I've worked in architecture for 5 years when I qualified, and I think this is good design. And I would disagree with Tony that on the MPP 79E, it does help raise the standards of design more generally in rural areas. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And I think it does enhance the immediate settings. It's a single house in a rural location surrounded by trees. And I think we have to be innovative looking at houses like this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brennan, did you have your hand up? Did I mistakenly see that?
It was a mannerism, but I just add my 2 pence anyway. I actually visited the site Saturday just gone because I was looking at the report and I'm thinking, does this fit in there? As far as I can see, with the existing trees, hedges, etc., it won't be really visible at all to anybody. So I did see some. I've been desperately looking for it. There was some reference, I thought, saying that it would be slightly obtrusive to walkers, or people walking, not from the Loke, because that's private and clearly says it's private, so people shouldn't be walking up there. And as I say, from the road, I don't really see it's going to be obtrusive at all. And also, although I haven't walked along the Bure Valley Walk, but I believe that's down below the level, so people from there wouldn't see it either. So, yeah, very finely balanced. That's my 2 pence, if I may.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Potton, did you have something you wanted to say? No? No. Okay.
I was just
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beadle.
Thank you, Chair. I occasionally go down this road. The look there is a private look. I just can't actually relate to the land levels. We were told, I believe, that the land levels rise going away from Marriotts Way. It's quite a tall building. It's quite a narrow building. The way it is featured doesn't really fit my bill for outstanding design. And I know the applicant is saying it's truly outstanding or innovative. But then it's been told to us that the alternative still includes design. So I am on the fence on this, and I just could ask somebody, how does the land lie compared, say, to the local and the main council road? Thank you.
Officer Harris.
If I can screen share and once I get to the slide, then I'll.
That's fine. This line is okay.
Okay.
Yep, we've got the screen.
Right. So in terms of levels, it's from what I can see, the site rises from, this is the southern boundary or the southwestern boundary. Site levels rise gently from southwest to northeast. They also appear to rise from the northwest to the
southeast.
Well, let's just move on. I described in my presentation, I think they are looking at levelling to create a level area because of the slight falls within the site. So a level area for the dwelling and the means of access in and to the vehicle circulation area. That is the scale. So you're looking at 2.5 stories, probably 9-10 meters, if not more tall. And if we can get to look at a photograph from outside the site. So that's that steep, narrow, but tall gable. The building will be visible from places externally, I would suggest. That is the location looking effectively due east with the building in this location here. So you are going to see it. This is all deciduous planting as well, so it will lose its leaves in the winter time. So that building will be visible. It won't necessarily be visible from the Bure Valley footpath because it's in a cutting, obviously, because it goes down with the road passing over the top of it. So hopefully that just answers Councillor Beadle's questions. And I think as well, you can see on here, the photographer is standing roughly at the position of the property looking towards the Adam and Eve property. Land levels start to rise towards where the photograph is taken for. You can also see that there's a rise to the left, which is to the east as well. And that's why they're looking at digging in slightly to create a level area for the dwelling itself. But yes, I think it will be visible from beyond the boundaries of the application site.
Thank you, Officer Harris.
Chair, if I just may just come back, because I just don't want to mislead the members in any way or form, if that's okay, in relating to weighing out the harms and the benefits. My response to Councillor Riley was in relation to whether or not you were taking in those additional, if you like, there was no harm in relation to the amenity and the setting of the listed building. I was saying they had little weight in the planning balance. Clearly, you need to look at the policy and other material considerations, of which there is self-build, which we've taken into account. So there is that balance to be made, but in our opinion, it doesn't meet the requirements of the policy in relation to the NPPF. I just didn't want to mislead Councillor Riley at all there, because clearly we do have to do some balancing there in relation to the benefits of the scheme. So I just didn't want to mislead anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer Manners. Okay, has anybody else got anything they'd like to say? Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have read this very carefully. What we're getting is that it doesn't fit in to the requirements. Could either Nigel or Helen possibly suggest what might be done to it to make the application meet the officer's approval? Because it's all been a case of we don't think it'll do because of this, because of that. Excuse me, sorry. But what exactly would we need presented to us that we could then clearly say, yeah, this is okay? It seems to be turned down on the grounds that it's not acceptable, but there's no suggestion as what might make it acceptable. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
I don't know that Officer Manners would be able to advise us of that at the moment. I think we're dealing with the application that's in front of us.
Okay.
But Officer Manners, if you want to offer some advice to Councillor Brennan.
I think that's quite correct, in that you have to look at what's before us rather than what could be acceptable on the site. I think from your officer's point of view, we wouldn't then, be redesigning a dwelling on the site. For me, I think you have to look at the two other criteria within Para 79 about, is this site appropriate to be able to accommodate a dwelling that does actually enhance its immediate setting, be sensitive to defining characters of the area. Some sites just can't achieve those two elements because it isn't appropriate to have a scale of a proposal in that location, because it's going to be really difficult to fit in with that local characteristics of the area. So we're not here to redesign it or look to see whether you could fit something on the site. But I think some sites you just won't come forward because you wouldn't be able to meet those last two criteria of that paragraph. And I'm not convinced, obviously, we're in that position on this site.
Okay, thank you. I think that we have had enough discussion in relation to this, and I just want to put my 2 pence worth in as well. I have to say that I won't be able to support Councillor Riley. I do feel that it doesn't meet all the 4 criteria for paragraph 79. I think the height and scale is not in keeping with that area at all, but that's just my opinion. So we will now go to the vote. It has been proposed by Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Karimi that we should, as a committee, agree to approve this application against the officer's reason for refusal, as stated in page 37 and 38 of your papers. So we're going to vote to say that we wish to approve this application against officer's recommendation. Officer Matthews, would you like to take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So if you could indicate if you are for or against the proposal. Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Beadle.
Against.
Councillor Brennan.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
Against.
Councillor Karimi Guvanloo.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
Against.
Councillor Leggett.
Against.
Councillor Prutton.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
And Councillor Ward.
For.
Chairman, that's 5 for and 5 against.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm just going to, let me just double check my calculations.
You are correct. I've counted.
I'll make it 6-5.
No, 6. No, I'm glad I checked. It is 6. No, I do apologise.
1, 2, 3,
3, 4, 5, 6.
6. Yes, you're
2,
right.
3, 4. Sorry, I do apologise, Chairman. It's
Which way?
It's 6 against and 4 for. I do apologise.
So 6 against the
And 5 for.
recommendation.
Yeah. So that
Can I
proposed.
just repeat that? Officer? It's 6 for and 5 against. Sorry, 5 for the proposal
6
and
against.
6 against. Yeah.
So
Chairman, I
recommendation. That's okay.
Yeah,
That's okay.
apologise for my confusion there, but definitely
No.
6 members have voted against the proposal and 5 members for.
Okay.
So the proposal is lost.
So the proposal to go against the officer's recommendation has been lost. So I would now like to propose that we should go with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application for the reasons as stated for refusal as stated on page 37 and 38 of the papers. So is there anyone who wants to second that, please?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move to the vote again, Officer Matthews. And this time we are voting that as a committee, we should agree to refuse this application for the reasons, the officer's reason for refusal as stated on page 37 and 38 of your papers. Thank you, Officer Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members again could indicate if they are for or against, and I promise I will do better calculations this time. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Karimi Guvanloo.
Against.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Prutton.
Against.
Councillor Riley.
Against.
And Councillor Ward.
Against.
6. Chairman, that's 6 members voting for and 5 members voting against. So that motion is carried.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So it has been agreed that this committee agrees to refuse this application for officers reason for refusal, as I previously stated. Okay, thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated. We will go into a 5-minute recess, and if you could please be back at your seats by 10:55, and if you could pause your video and mute your screens, please.
Sue, I've lost my remote connection, so I've got to just log back in.
Okay.
You just need to give me a few minutes as I'm.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So when you do get back in, Nigel, you'll be doing the screen share,
I'll
and
be screen
Matthew will
sharing.
be doing the presentation.
We can see you, Nigel, so you are back on the screen. Can I
Yeah,
just
that's-
apologise on behalf of the committee chairman that I actually lost my connection a couple of times during the last presentation. I don't know whether that was noticed on the screen, but I had to re-log in. So I apologise for that. If I do lose it, for some reason, my connection today doesn't seem to be stable. So I have dipped out a couple of times during the meeting.
Okay, no,
I
that
had to
didn't
re-log
notice
in.
because we were in screen share. But I think that there's a problem with quite a lot of the internet connections this morning. So we just have to deal with it as when we come to it.
Right.
If you want to practice, if you want to try to see if you can get the full screen before we go to the, or shall we carry on with the? Are we still waiting for the two councillors to come back? I was going to say, shall we carry on with the roll call, or do you want to share your screen now?
I'm just meeting. Right. Can you see that now?
No.
How about now?
Yep, you can see it now.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
This
perfect.
should be stream mode. Yeah.
Yep. And sorry, can we go back to the members just to do the roll call? Or are you worried that you might lose it?
No,
because I'm sure that. Yeah, we're just waiting for Councillor Fulcher.
It's very gestural, very jumpy today.
Yeah, there must be gremlins in the works.
It's birds on the line.
Okay, so we'll just get Councillor Fulcher back online, and then we can, Officer Matthews, we could go to the roll call. Would you like to start the roll call whilst we wait for Councillor Fulcher to come online? Hopefully he'll be here by the time we get to the end of it.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Adams.
Yeah.
Councillor Beadle.
Present.
Councillor Brennan.
Present.
Councillor Fisher. Councillor Folger, are you with us?
Yes.
Thank
Can
you.
you just start your video, please,
Yeah.
Councillor Fulcher?
Yeah.
Councillor Karimi Guvenlou.
Present.
Councillor Lawn.
Present.
Councillor Leggett.
Present.
Councillor Prutton.
Present.
Councillor Riley.
Present.
And Councillor Ward.
Present.
All present, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Fulcher, can you start your video?
I have requested it, but
Wonderful, thank you very much. Okay, and we don't have any public speakers for this this application, so we'll go straight to the presentation. And Nigel, Councillor Harris is going, Officer Harris is going to share his screen, and Officer Rook is going to do the presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, Nigel's kindly agreed to share his screen. We'll go through this presentation. This is Unit 7, Avian Way, Salhouse Road, Sprowston. Planning application is for a change of use of that particular unit from B8 to D2. As set out in the supplementary schedule on page 60 of your agenda, use classes order has been revised earlier this month so that the use class of the proposed use, which is an indoor sports facility, is now a new use class E, lowercase d, and not D2 as reported. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. This is on the screen in front of you. You can see the building on Avian Way. Avian Way is just marked to the right-hand side of the star. Avian Way is the road that links in from Salhouse Road into this commercial development. The building with the star is our application building. The other thing this plan shows is Salhouse Road to the south of the site and the area of Norwich City Council's primary housing development to the south of Salhouse Road. The other thing, just on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see there are residential properties on Falcon Road East, albeit they're not immediately bounded by the application site. The application site is bounded by other commercial units. If we go to the next slide, Nigel. You can see that this site is within the settlement limit for Sprowston. Again, it's marked by the star at the southern edge of the settlement limit amongst the commercial units, and then further to the north is the main residential built up area of Sprowston itself. To the next slide. So this identifies two things. It identifies the red line of the application site with a access directly onto Avian Way, but it does also show that this whole area is included within this strategic employment site, which is allocated within the development management DPD under policy E1 and reserved for employment uses. So the traditional business uses of B1, B2 and B8. Once again, there is an update in relation to the B1 uses. They're no longer classed as B1. They're in the new E class, but it still retains that same classification of business employment area, which is the surrounding units of the site. This application has been brought before members for determination, as the proposal to use this site as an indoor sports facility is considered to be contrary to the provisions of the strategic employment policy, and therefore contrary to policies of your DMDPD. Go to the next slide. So this slide identifies a number of things. Certainly identifies on the left-hand side under the site location plan, the red line of the application site, which shows the building, and it also shows an area of car parking to the north of the building. That is accessed further to the north. So if we just take it a little bit further to the north there, and that's the access onto what's called Rice Way. And then if you come back along Rice Way, just to the right, you then connect back to Avian Way and back down to Salhouse Road. So that would be the route for vehicular traffic into the site. You can see as you come onto Avian Way, the application site does extend to Avian Way at that point there, and it's intended that that's going to be the route for pedestrians and cyclists getting access into the site. So pedestrians and cyclists wouldn't have to take the route deeper into the commercial development. They could come into the site from that point closer to Salhouse Road at that point there. And that plan then shows the building, shows the configuration of the car parking area, 40 spaces plus 3 disabled spaces, all sort of independent and accessed off of the Rice Way access, and shows that it's fully enclosed, fully independent of any other development around the on the Avian Way commercial development. To the next slide. Oh, that's it. So this shows two things. On the left-hand side, it shows the proposed floor plan, which is primarily the sort of the green area, which is the indoor sports facility. It's like a football training facility within the building itself. And then at the entrance to the building, we have a area of sort of a waiting and a seating area in the blue, a small little pink building area of the building, which is an office area, and a yellow area, which is classed as a conditioning area. So that will be where general sort of fitness activities take place within that part of the building. And then just to the left of the conditioning is the showers, toilets, and a small little kitchen area, all internal to the building itself. Then to the right-hand side, we have the proposed elevation. So the main plan at the bottom of the 4 is the front elevation. So you can see as you come in from the car park, the main entrance is on the left-hand side, which is through those roller shutter doors. That's the main entrance in, straight from the car park into the sort of main sort of reception area. And then the other elevations are the southeast elevation at the far end of the building and both side elevations. The elevations are unaffected by these proposals. There's no extensions, no physical alterations, other than a little bit of signage just to mark the entrances into the building. On to the next slide. Photographs of the site. So the one on the left-hand side is the entrance from Salhouse Road into Avian Way. The view on the left is looking back towards sort of Mousehold Lane, Sprowston Retail Park direction. You can see from both of those slides there are footpaths directly from Salhouse Road into Avian Way, and residential properties on the opposite side, which are the houses within the Norwich City area. Going to the next slide. So this is on Avian Way itself, looking down into the development itself. Just where that yellow sign is the entrance into the pedestrian entrance there. So that takes you into the building as a pedestrian and a cyclist, but motorists will continue through into the development past that building on the first brick building on the left-hand side. If we go to the next slide, you can start to see that. So you come past that building on the right. The next slide then shows you the turn into Rice Way. That's the turning into Rice Way. So that's Avian Way coming into Rice Way. And then the next slide then takes you into the car park for the development proposal. That's straight into the car park. And then that's the building that was shown on those elevations with the entrance in to that point there. Next slide. I think it's just an internal. So you can see it's a large sort of span building. It does have a central division at the moment, but that would obviously be removed to facilitate the sports pitch in the centre of the site. And then there's be some internal divisions to create the rooms that I spoke about as far as the office, the waiting area, the toilets, and all those facilities all internal to the site. So it's a big, large open plan space, ideally suited for this indoor recreational use. Next slide. It's just the final one, just to sort of to bring together the proposals. Going through to the report, as the report sets out, the site is within the settlement limit and within a wider defined strategic employment site, which policy E1 of the DMDPD reserves for employment uses, being B2 and B8 uses, as well as the new class E, lowercase g uses, and that replaces the old B1 use. As the proposed use is not considered to be an employment use, it would not accord with policy E1 of the DMDPD. The report sets out, and it should be noted, that the building has been vacant since the middle of last year and has been marketed since July 2019, with no interest reported for its permitted use. In addition, the applicant states that the proposed use will employ 12 full-time equivalent staff, will operate from noon to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. The comments of Sprowston Town Council are noted, and a response to each of their points is included within the report. No further comments have been received and no objections been submitted. Although the site is on a commercial development, it is considered to be close to a large area of housing on the opposite side of Salhouse Road, with housing in Sprowston in the wider locality, and will provide an indoor recreational sports facility available for use by the community. There's considered to be no detriment from the proposed use on the character and appearance of the area, on neighbour amenity or highway safety. Furthermore, given that there has been a lack of interest from any other operator to retain the permitted uses, then the provision of an indoor recreational facility in this location is considered to represent an acceptable form of development. The recommendation, therefore, is to grant approval for the change of use as reported, with a revision to condition 3, which needs to refer to the new use class E, lowercase d, rather than as reported. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and if we can go back to the members, please. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd normally say that we could ask questions of the officer before we go to public speaking, but as we don't have public speaking, we can go to the officer's question and discussion. So if you could unmute all of the committee, please, and we can go into the discussion. And if you would like to show of hands who would like to speak. Have you got any questions for the officer? Councillor Carini.
Hi, thanks, Matthew.
Hi.
The proposed floor plan is quite small, and I can't see if there's a disabled toilet there.
There is. I think there's two toilets and one disabled toilet.
Okay, and is the access to the building all wheelchair friendly?
As a ramp up the front, yes.
Okay, that's all I've got to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Riley?
Thank you. Yeah, I know there's two things really, Matthew. The on 5 point, I've lost it now. Page 43. There's reference here to the purpose for change of use, which is football training, and then you've also indicated that there would be the equivalent of 12 full-time jobs. I'm guessing that could be more people than that, but their working hours that add up to 12 full-time jobs, I'm guessing. Could you shed any more information on the football training? Because you're saying that this would be operational for X amount of days during the week. Is this actually for Norwich City or for local football clubs, or?
It'd be my understanding. Sorry, my understanding is it's available for hire. So local organisations, whether it be organised football teams or people who enjoy a kickabout, can hire the facility and use it, as there are other outdoor facilities at the moment around Norwich. But no, it's not specific for Norwich City. I think it's a company that's set up to offer this sort of community facility, shall we say.
So just clarify again here. So this prediction of 12 jobs, it's not actually like Norwich City or something like that. There's actually, you've already got its use in, it's for hiring out, and therefore that prediction of 12 may vary.
Yeah, I think it's called an elite training. So I imagine there'll be some coaches, there'll be people involved in that. There'll be people as far as the administration, and people in relation to, just ensuring that the facilities are run properly, correctly, bookings taken, everything like that. So with all of these things,
Matthew, is that part of a national franchise or just a local person?
I think it's a local.
Okay, and just one other point as well. I note that, doing a bit of consultancy here on commercial property myself, which I do, that it's not unusual for this, at the moment, the use of this building and this category to be vacant for a year or more before they get let. We've also, of course, had since July 2019, COVID since March. So things would have stood still in relation to that. We've not had normal sort of operating economic activity going. So I think that the change of use with a year, however, a large period of that being COVID, there may be a point here around offsetting potential higher number of jobs as opposed to this potential here. And I'm just wondering, actually, should this wait for another year?
That's a difficult one. I take your point insofar as COVID and what that's done in relation to marketing. It's difficult to say whether this would have made any difference, given it was empty before. It was been empty, obviously, at least 6 months before, wasn't it? If it was empty in July and we had the whole of the rest of July, COVID kicked in around sort of March time. So it's had a good sort of 9 months or so of marketing. And it is a large warehouse building in amongst a number of large warehouse buildings. So it's not one of these sort of, on a modern estate that's going to attract a certain amount of people. I recognise that it's one of those things that, in a way, is probably better and related to the community use than it is to sort of the large warehouse use. But I take your point, and that's a difficult one to categorically say what the effect of COVID would have been on the marketing of this. My honest personal feeling is that it hasn't helped, but I don't think we would have had that interest. If the building like this, you'd have thought once it becomes on the market, if there's a demand, that demand would have come forward in the first 6 to 9 months, not the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, a lot of these, Matthew, stand empty for up to 2 years before they get let. standard with this warehousing. But thank you, thank you, Matthew.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cotton?
Actually, my question was covered by the first part of Councillor Riley's. It was about the organisation providing this facility for the community, the Elite Academy, which to me does still smack of Norwich City Football Club. But Matthew has successfully answered my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think I'm happy to support this application. I think actually it's good use of a vacant building. I'm pretty certain that I know the site very well. I'm pretty certain there are other vacant buildings on site that have been vacant for quite a while. The buildings on this particular industrial estate, they're not new. So if someone is looking for new warehousing to make an impression, they're not going to be suitable. I think this is actually a good use of this particular building, and it is close to the built-up area. It's close to residential. There's plenty of parking, and I'm very happy to recommend the.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Do I have anyone else who wishes to speak before we would go to the vote on this application? Leah, have I missed anyone?
I haven't missed anyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if everyone's agreeable, we will go to the vote. It has been proposed by Councillor Fisher and seconded by Councillor Riley that we as a committee should agree to the officer's recommendation to approve this application subject to the conditions that are stated on page 45 of your papers. Officer Matthews, could you go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members could indicate if they are for or against. Councillor Adams?
For.
Councillor Beadle?
For.
Councillor Brennan?
For.
Councillor Fisher? For. Councillor Folger?
For.
Councillor Karimi Guvanloo?
For.
Councillor Lawn?
For.
Councillor Leggett?
For.
Councillor Prutton?
For.
Councillor Riley?
For.
Councillor Ward?
For.
Chairman, you'll be relieved to know I haven't got to count those votes. It's unanimous for approval.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, if the committee is agreeable, we will move on to the fourth and last application for our meeting today. Application number 2020-1017. That's interesting. Okay, application number 4, and the number is 2020-1017, and it is for Helston. And can I just confirm that we have all the public speakers that we need today, please?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And I just let the members know that we have had an apology from Councillor Gurney. She was planning to speak at this meeting, but unfortunately isn't able to do so. So due to the family emergency, so we will move on to the presentation. And Councillor Rook, we have got the members, Peter Burton and Ross Warren and Craig Driver. So Officer Rook, if you could please do the presentation, thank you.
Yep, thank you. So Helston Hospital, Drayton High Road. This is a development of 5 number 16-bed ensuite non-secure wards. Total number of beds proposed is 80. This is an outline application with matters of access and scale for consideration at this stage, whilst all other aspects will be considered under a future reserved matters application if this application is approved. Do you want to go to the next slide, Nigel? Okay, so this is the sort of over aerial photograph, identifying the red line of the application site, identifies the access. I mentioned access is part of the consideration of this particular application. So that access is forming and connecting onto an existing access on Hospital Lane. That road already serves part of the Helston Hospital development, but it also serves the East of England Ambulance Service station building, which is located in that part of the site. Not part of this application, but they share an access onto that part of the site. Something just appeared on my screen. I want to just get rid of that. Yep. So then moving from the access into the development site, as you just stop there, Nigel, on the right-hand side or just north of the cursor, there are a number of single-storey hospital wards, and they're relevant in relation to a lot of the photographs show those in the context of the site. You can see they adjoin the site. They're not part of the site, but they do adjoin it. And as you move further along the access road, just a building there to the left, the L-shaped building that you can see there is a pharmacy building. That's a pharmacy that serves the hospital site and other trust facilities. That building would be relocated because that form was within part of the application site. So that would be a further application to recite that particular pharmacy building. And once again, you'll see that on some of the photographs as we go along. Then the application site itself is in that green area. The boundary to Low Road, which is just to the left there, is marked by a line of mature trees. And then beyond the mature trees and Low Road is a residential development of Wensum Valley Close, housing development there. And just beyond that, further, is the River Wensum itself. So you can see the River Wensum Valley down at that lower part, and the levels are rising up from the valley, Wensum up the valley into the application site, and then to Helston Hospital itself, which is up at the top of the sort of the plateau. To the next slide. This slide is taken from your site allocations DPD, and it identifies some of the allocations, the designations that have been identified for Helston. So once again, the application site is in the centre of the site there. This application site is outside of a defined settlement limit. The Wensum Valley Close residential area and Low Road does have a settlement limit, but the Helston Hospital, or this part of Helston Hospital, is outside of that settlement limit. And then the other things that are relevant for Helston Hospital is the HEL1 allocation, and that is an allocation for approximately 300 houses and B1 uses. And then we've also got the HEL2 designation, which is on the other side of Hospital Lane, and that's the Persimmon housing development, the former golf course site, for up to 1,000 houses. And that's under development at the moment in a number of phases, which is taking access primarily from the Drayton High Road, which runs through the centre of that site. That's it. And the other thing to mention while we've got that slide in front of us is the proximity of the application site to the main built-up area of Helston itself, bus stops along Drayton High Road in front of the hospital site, and also bus stops on Low Road itself. Then facilities within Helston along Middleton's Lane and at Reefham Road. So the next slide. So now some photographs of the site. Mentioned access was one of the considerations. This is the existing point of vehicular access into the site. This is the access on Hospital Lane, looking towards Drayton High Road. One of the things to note is that there is a continuous footpath along that part of Drayton High Road. There is a proposal to just enhance that crossing so that where the cursor is just at the moment, there's a little area of grass that's continued. That grassed area will continue as footpath to allow a proper crossing over the junction and to continue then up to the Drayton High Road. So there's an improvement there where currently the pedestrian crossing is a little bit sort of pushed out into the roadway, which isn't ideal. So that's an improvement there. The other thing just to note on this, and you'll see through the report that the Highway Authority have requested that a clear visibility display in both directions of 120 metres is provided. We're on a fairly straight bit of road, but the concern was with some of the existing vegetation overhanging and encroaching into that 120 metre vision display. So there is a requirement to prune back or cut back some of that overhanging tree growth. And there is one tree on the just beyond where that sign is, just a little bit further along, there's a tree just within or very close to the visibility display that will have to be felled in that direction. And if you go to the next slide, I think there's another 3 trees in the other direction, which again are right on the edge of the visibility display. which would need to be felled. But you can see that there's a good group of trees there, and any frontage trees would be lost against the deeper growth of tree belt there. So then to the next slide, we're going to start going into the site, and we start to see the development development site as it opens out. So that's the view going into the service road into Hospital Lane. Next slide, Nigel. That one, yep. So yeah, we're starting to see on the left-hand side is the car park for the ambulance station. On the right-hand side is those single-story hospital wards that I was mentioning about earlier, and the flat roof pharmacy building, which would have to be removed and relocated. Just to the where you see the street light. Just beyond the street light, that's the application site itself. Behind there, and you can see the backdrop of trees to Low Road. So if we move to the next slide, we start to go further into the site again. So we're in the site itself, looking back at those single-story wards. You can see a sort of open green area. The land level does fall away from that roadway, the service road, down to the boundary to Low Road. And then to the next slide, you can start to see the context of the application site and the boundaries around the site. So once again, this is the southern section of the application site, looking down towards the tree belt of Low Road in the centre of your site there. So you can see the strong screen and an effective boundary that provides to the Low Road, and then picking up the pharmacy to the right and the ambulance station to the left. But we're in an area of sort of undeveloped grounds to the hospital site, all within the boundaries of the hospital site itself. But that's been identified as an area for development potential for this proposal. So the next slide. This is down at the far southeast corner of the site. So we've got Low Road on the left-hand side, looking back up the slope towards the single-story wards and the pharmacy building. You can see there the sort of the fall in levels between the sort of the lower part of the site and the service road, which will be the access into and out of the development. To the next slide. Again, just sort of within the boundaries, looking up back towards those wards. Next slide. So this is over on the far boundary. So this is on the northern boundary with Low Road on the right-hand side and the development site directly in front of us, and the hospital to the left-hand side and the wards on the left-hand side in there. So that's a wider view of that undeveloped development site. Next slide. Okay, this is an extract from the Helston neighbourhood plan. You'll have seen through the report and Councillor Gurney's comments in relation to what's termed the Helston Green Grid. This is a policy within the neighbourhood plan, which is seeking to promote and create a number of sort of green corridors through the parish of Helston itself. The application site is marked where the cursor is at the moment, and the Low Road is one of those green grid lines which picks up that sort of treed frontage to the Low Road, but then also the access and the road that goes up Hospital Lane, that's it, which is well treed at the moment, and there's no, that's a good strong sort of green corridor leading from the Low Road back up into primarily the most built up area part of Helston, with the Drayton High Road and then Middleton's Lane. So I'll pick up on that as I go through the appraisal section, but it's relevant just so you can have an assessment and appreciation of those lines of the green grid and how they relate to the application site itself. Next slide. This is the plan which identifies the access. Apologies, this is quite a far out. I don't know if it's possible to zoom in on that. Oh, well done, Nigel. Yeah. So that identifies the access, identifies the 120-metre vision splay in both directions, and it just identifies the position, the single tree that needs to be felled on the sort of to the north of the access, and that one, yep, there. And then I think there's a group of 3 smaller trees in that little section there that also need to be removed just because of their close proximity to the edge of the 120-metre vision splay. But that's a requirement of the Highway Authority to improve visibility at that existing junction. To the next slide. And this shows what I was mentioning earlier about the provision of the improved crossing, pedestrian crossing at the Hospital Lane Junction. So they're going to have a new sort of footway crossing there. Whereas currently, as you remember from the photograph, the sort of the crossing was in pushing people out into the road. I think you've gone on to the next slide there, Nigel. So you can jump back.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, no, it's.
I have
That's
to say
fine.
that's
No, that's
not
fine.
very clear. That's the slide on my screen isn't very clear at all.
Have you've got that in your paper? Have you got that in your paper plans?
Yeah.
You'll have that in your paper plans
Yeah.
that were sent through. So that all that's showing is the hatching is the crossing point on both sides of the footpath in across the existing junction, which we showed you some photographs of earlier. That's it.
Yeah.
So that just shows the extension of the footpath and a formalised crossing, which is set back from the edge of the road, whereas currently that footpath crossing is right into the road. And this is a route that children use from who live down on the low road area, walking up to Helston High School. So this will be quite a good improvement for children walking in the area, that they've got an area that they can cross that without having to walk in the road. And I think the next slide is probably the drainage proposals. Yep. Once again, through the report, one of the considerations at the outline stage was with the lead local flood authority. And what we've sought to do through this application is provide some sustainable drainage features within the site down at that southeast corner, so that we'll have a series of open ponds. So the water will come off the building, filter, be directed into the ponds. They will then, based on the site level falling at the higher level, as those ponds fill up, they will then overflow and run down into an infiltration area, which has got specific channels dug within it and drainage features within each of those infiltration ponds to allow the water to drain away naturally, rather than having to be directed into the public sewer, which was a concern locally, that the public sewers are not able to accommodate additional flows. So the applicants have sought to deal with that by creating sustainable drainage features within the site, which will actually create quite an attractive water features from on that part of the site, and form part of the wider landscaping of the ward proposals. Next slide, I think it's probably just the last one. Yeah, then this is just the last slide that just brings the context of the various areas of the hospital into view, and also the application site itself. So if I then go to the report, I can make you aware that, as I've said, the access is considered as part of this application, but also scale has also been included, and the applicants have stated the building will be predominantly single story, some elements submerged into the ground to make use of the fall in site level. In terms of floor area, this will be around 6,000 square metres. The application is brought before committee at the request of Councillor Gurney for the reasons given on page 49 of your report. There are no further consultation replies or other updates to give. As members will have seen, the officer report is very comprehensive. It's not necessary to reiterate all the points contained within it. However, it may be helpful to draw out a few key issues. The site is outside the limit for Helston. However, policy GC2 of your DMDPD permits development outside of settlement limits where it complies with a specific policy and/or allocation, and provided it does not result in any significant adverse impact. In this case, policy H5 is relevant as it permits proposals for residential institutions outside settlement limits, where it is accessible by public transport within reasonable proximity of community facilities, and where it has been demonstrated there is an identified need in the locality. It is considered the site is accessible by public transport, given the proximity to bus stops on Drayton High Road and Low Road, and the community facilities within Helston, which are within a walking distance along Middleton's Lane. The report sets out the applicant's detailed statement of need at paras 5.4 to 5.5, and taking account of these points, officers consider the proposals will address the shortcomings of the existing accommodation and improve patient facilities and bed capacity. It's also worth noting at this stage that the main site has been allocated under the Site Allocations Dpd to be redeveloped for approximately 300 houses and B1 employment uses. This means that any new wards can't be built within the main site, and why the current site has been selected. I mentioned about highways. Turning to the highways aspects, the highways now includes improvements to the pedestrian crossing, clear visibility displays of 120 metres in both directions by cutting back some of the vegetation to facilitate that. And capacity at this junction and along Hospital Lane is not an issue for the Highway Authority, who now raise no objections. Turning to the character and appearance and neighbour amenity, there are two further issues where comments have been received from Helston Parish Council, Councillor Gurney and neighbours. The site itself is an undeveloped sloping green field bounded to the southwest along Low Road by a line of mature trees. When in leaf, provide a very effective screen of the site, and the majority of the houses in Wensum Valley Close have their own rear gardens to Low Road and their own boundary features. The site is not particularly visible from Hospital Lane, and the site is considered to form part of the grounds to the hospital, and the proposals relate to that rather than being viewed as an intrusion into open countryside. It's therefore considered the proposals comply with policy GC4 and EN2 of the DMDPD. I mentioned about the policies of Helston Neighbourhood Plan and the Green Grid. This is policy 1, and this seeks to develop a green grid within the parish which builds on the concept of the River Wensum Green Corridor and looks to create further green corridors that spread out through the parish. It is considered the retention of the mature tree belt along Low Road, and where possible its enhancement through future landscaping scheme will achieve the aims of this policy in this part of the parish. In terms of residential amenities, the retention of the mature tree belt along Low Road and the distance to residential neighbours combine so that no neighbour will be directly overlooked from these proposals, especially when one considers the proposed wards would be single storey. Concern has been raised about light pollution, and the applicant will need to address this concern in the detailed designs to come forward. Other comments about noise disturbance from patients have also been received, and this is ultimately a matter for the staff in the wards to manage, but the design of the buildings can also take this into account. Given that there are not considered to be any significant adverse impacts on the proposals, they are considered to comply with policies H5 and GC2 of the DMDPD. In conclusion, and noting the comments received, it is considered that these proposals in their amended form represent an acceptable form of development which will provide much needed additional medical care facilities as part of the site where such uses exist. The further details will be subject of a further reserved matters application, and the recommendation is to grant outline approval subject to the conditions as listed in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. And members, do you have any questions in relation to the presentation? Councillor Karimi?
Thank you, Matthew, for a good presentation. I do support this application, considering the amount of beds needed at the moment for the Mental Health Trust. One concern I have is the infiltration ponds at the bottom of the slope. How deep are they going to be? And will they be protected from the residents?
Oh yeah, as far as that goes, those details are still to come through as part of the detailed reserve matters application. Insofar as the depth, I might need to look at the agents for that because I don't have that information to hand. I know there has been a lot of drainage work done, both with their consultants and the lead local flood authority. So yeah, I haven't got that information to hand, and I unfortunately I can't pull the plans out and have a look at them because I'm remote from them at the moment. But I think if I direct that question to the agents, they may be able to answer that question for you.
Okay, and will there be some sort of fencing along the tree belt on Low Road to stop residents getting onto the road?
Once again, yeah, these are things that we picked up at the Reserve Matters stage. The agents are present, and it may be something they can answer on as part of that. But I'd imagine there would be some fencing to prevent patients getting out onto the Low Road. Currently, I think it's a little low post and wire fence or something like that. So it would need a more secure boundary.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any further questions before we go to public speaking? Okay. I can't see anyone. That's lovely. Thank you. Okay. Officer Atherton, could you please unmute Mr. Burton, Mr. Warren, and Mr. Driver? Okay, thank you. And I've got it that, Mr. Burton, I believe that you will be addressing the committee, and we will have Mr. Warren and Mr. Driver on hand to answer any questions if the committee should so wish in their 5 minutes that they would have. So, Mr. Burton, there you are. Sorry, I'm looking around. I can't find you. Okay, so is that acceptable, Mr. Burton?
Yes,
I've got that right. Okay, that's lovely. So if I could just explain to you that, as I've said previously, that we don't have a clock that we can tell you the time scale, but Officer Atherton will advise you when you have 1 minute. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you could please introduce yourself to the committee, and you have 5 minutes from now.
Thank you. My name is Peter Burton. I'm the Projects Director for the Helston project. I'm working for the NHS Trust. And I'd just like to go through some bits and pieces with you. So the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Trust submitted a bid via the Norfolk and Waverley SDP to the NHS for a Helston ward rebuild project in July 2018. It was approved in August 2019 as part of the Wave 4B allocation. This outline planning application seeks approval for the principle of the development in line with the successful bid. The key drivers to improve on the quality of the existing ward environment within the existing building, which currently serves for poor line of sight, ligature risks, narrow and unlit and poor lit corridors, a lack of quiet space and poor access to external spaces. This has led to some negative feedback from regulator bodies such as the CQC, who are questioning the current configuration of the limitations on aiding recovery for the service user. A further driver for this application is the overall capacity of the service and its current dependency on out-of-area beds and private sector placements. Just want to go through some of the benefits of the development. Benefits of the development is the new build will provide a new and modern therapeutic environment. The impact on clinical care that which will be provided by including more therapy space and access areas. The new ward will be access to meaningful psychology and rehabilitation treatment at the centre of people's care, so their whole time in the hospital is meaningful and effective. The integrated design of the ward and therapy area will make it easier for people and staff to work together to support recovery, whilst giving staff a great space to work and learn. There will be 15 extra beds, which will have a significant impact on our out of capacity to treat all people in a local hospital rather than needing to go out of area. Potential of creating an amazing asset for the local community. We also have an engagement programme. We have taken the opportunity during the application determination period to engage with staff, clinicians, service users, and community services across Norfolk to establish a consensus clinical design brief. In participation with a concept and detailed planning design stage. These discussions have been broad and increasingly improving to help make sure we can deliver a lasting piece of architecture in the area. We will be working closely with our service users, families, carers, staff and NHS partners to develop the plans so that we can make the very best use of this opportunity and ensure it brings the greatest benefit to the local people. We have advertised for people to come forward to be involved through our website, print and social media, local magazines, and also via third sector organisations. Our people participation needs have been instrumental in gathering feedback. We plan further community engagement on the concept design plans during our REAP Stage 2 design process.
1 minute remaining.
Which is scheduled for November, December 20, and will continue to engage throughout the design and construction programme. I'd like to say this is a great opportunity for the local community, also Norfolk and Suffolk Trust, and for the NHS as a whole. And we are working with specialist consultants in therapeutic designs, which has the potential to set the blueprint for the future of mental health care, not just in Norfolk, but nationwide. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Trust.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Okay, members, can I ask, do you have any questions for the public speaker, please? Councillor Kareem, no? Councillor Ward?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burton, for that. I wasn't quite clear whether these wards are replacing existing wards, and if so, what will happen to the old wards once the people move into these new ones, please?
So what we'll be doing, what we're looking at is, yes, they will be replacing some of the old wards, and obviously with the wards that we have at the moment, we are looking at that plan at the moment, and we will be going into more detail as we go into our design with regards to those wards and what the future use for them will be. So at the moment, we're actually going through that process at the moment. It's very difficult for me to just answer that directly with a clear direction as we're in that design process now.
Okay, that's lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for this public speaker? No? Okay, thank you. And members, can I just ask, as I said, we've got Peter Burton and Moss Warren here. Is there anything that you would like to ask from either of those public speakers at the moment, or this would be your only chance to ask any questions? Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending with us this morning. As that brings our public meeting to a close. As I said, Councillor Gurney, unfortunately, has been is unable to attend due to circumstances out of her control. So, members, we will now have a discussion in relation to the application in front of us. And if I can just ask that if I don't see you put your hand up to speak, if you could please request it through chat, and Leah will bring it to my attention. Do we have anyone who has anything who wants to discuss or ask the officers in relation to this application?
Chair.
Councillor Ward?
Oh, it's just to say this is a very much needed facility, and it will stop all the extra expense of taking people out of county. So I'm all for it, and I would like to move officers' recommendation.
Okay,
I'd second that, Chair, as well.
Yeah, Chair,
Okay, thank you. But we still have a few people who would like to discuss the situation. So I'll make a note of that, and we'll go to Councillor Riley. Did you have anything else you want to say?
Well, it's actually in the same ilk. It's very much needed, this, and required. It meets all the plans. The conditions, of course, are attached there, one of which certainly addresses the lighting issue as part of the condition in the final recommendation here. So with all of those caveats and conditions, we should support this application, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Leggett?
Thank you, Chairman. I know this area very well, and I do understand the points that were made on page 52 by residents. But I think that when reading through, Roger, Matthew has covered most of these. There was one that I did missed the answer to, and that was at the bottom of page 52. It says low road is a dangerous road, and if any patients will wander down. I have a feeling that question was asked and was answered. Could I ask Matthew just to clarify that with me? But apart from that, I certainly support the proposal.
Yeah, I think the question was asked around sort of fencing along the low road boundary. I sort of indicated that that would be necessary to provide a more secure boundary, but those elements would form part of the next stage of this application. You know, reserve matters application would include landscaping, including boundary treatments and things like that. So yes, I feel that would be covered under the next application, but noted.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Prutten.
It's a comment more than a question. As someone who lives relatively locally and uses that road, those trees being cut back will be a godsend, because it's terribly difficult to see down there. And with the ambulances running out from the ambulance station, this can be nothing but a bonus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone who lives there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, really, just to add that I fully support this. There's a need to expand units. There's a need to not send patients out of county, both expense-wise and convenience and visiting-wise. So I fully support this. I noticed that the objectors actually say they have no objection to the expansion of healthcare facilities. So hence, I'm not quite sure why they're objecting, but this is important. This is needed, and in fact, we're better to expand healthcare facilities than on existing hospital sites. So 100% support for myself. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And if I can just add as well, I think this is something which is so essential, especially in Norfolk at the moment. So to take it to 65 to 80 new beds is absolutely amazing. And I hope that if this is accepted, that we would move on as soon as possible. So if I can please ask if there's any further questions. Leah, do we have anyone that I've missed out?
No further questions.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. So if I can just say that it has been proposed by Councillor Ward and seconded by Councillor Riley that we should as a committee agree to the officer's recommendation to approve this application with conditions as set out on page 58 of your papers. Officer Matthews. Thank you. You've gone back on mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If you could indicate members if you are for or against. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Beadle.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Folger.
For.
Councillor Karimi.
For.
Councillor Lawn.
For.
Councillor Leggett.
For.
Councillor Prutten.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
Again, Chairman, that's unanimous.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. As I said earlier, I hope that we can really move this forward now and get things moving. So thank you very much for your time. And again, committee, that brings our committee meeting to an end today. Thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated, and we'll see you soon. Okay, thank you. Take care.